let's talk about food. Why do we need to eat? We know why we need to eat. We need to eat to stay alive. But why do we need to eat to stay alive? The Eibishter, God Almighty, the Master of the world, chose to design His world in such a way that every living thing needs to depend on other living things for its survival, for nourishment. Why? Obviously, some living things depend on non-living things for survival, but every living thing needs to be nourished. Moreover, when you learn deeper dimensions of Torah, you discover that this phenomena is not limited to the creations down here, but in fact that on high there are also mystical concepts of nourishment, of feeding. The extreme of it is that there are actually Maamar Chazal that talk about Kvayochal Hashem Himself eating. And in Chassidus, of course, when they encounter these medrashim that suggest that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is eating as carbon ilachme liishai, there's of course different interpretations, but the medrashim actually explain literally that Hashem has to eat food. And of course, Kabbalah and Chassidus explains it doesn't mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God forbid. It means elokus, godliness, ishtalshalos, and so forth. But why? Why is there this need for creations to need other beings to live, to survive? This is not a biological question, it's not a medical question, it's not a scientific question. This is a Torah question, and specifically a Pnimiyus Torah question. Why did Hashem design reality in such a fashion? So the first point, which is of course the most familiar point, is the idea that that we're really not living on food. We're living on Moitzepi Hashem. In other words, when I eat food, my physical body is nourished by physical compounds and substances and materials. But my spiritual body, or to say it more precisely, the link between my spiritual self and my physical body is being nourished by the spirituality, by the life within the food. Every piece of food that one consumes is living, or it has an idea of life. And the biological matter, the chemical material, sustains the biological matter of the physical person or animal or plant, and the spiritual person and lahavdil animal and plant are nourished by the life within that food. In other words, there's more to food than the taste and the physical regeneration of the biological matter and the energy, of course, that a human being needs. There's also the ruchnisdik element, the spiritual element. This is classic, this is elementary, this is basic. All over Kabbalah and Chassidus, this is discussed. The idea that when we eat, we draw life from entities other than ourselves, who have advantages over us, and therefore are in a position to give us life. But is there more? And I'm not sure if all the points I'm about to make are distinct, but let's talk about it in aspects. One of the most logical and down-to-earth philosophical ideas linked to the dependency upon food is the idea of dependency itself. I need something outside of myself. Just like the Rambam writes about a fast day, that when you fast, you're hungry. And when you're hungry, you're vulnerable and you're weak. And when you're vulnerable and you're weak, you remember your own mortality. I need something outside of myself. Even if that thing outside of myself is salt, a mineral. I need something outside of myself. God created all of creation, and certainly all of nature, in a dependent way. This dependency reminds us of our dependence. We're not independent. We cannot survive by ourselves. We can't live in a vacuum. We can't live in outer space, in no man's land. We're dependent on oxygen, dependent on water, dependent on sunlight, and so forth and so on. These dependencies remind us of our own frailty, our own limitation. And it's true not just on earth, it's true also in the heavens. Every creation, in as much as the creation, is dependent. And nourishment is aspect of dependency which we pay attention to, because you have to nourish, you have to consume, you have to take it in. That's a significant point. It reminds us of our dependency and therefore of our own mortality, that we're not God, if you will. Additionally, there is the mystical concept of birurim. When we consume, we affect birur. The word birur means to disentangle, to unconfuse. Things are mixed together, they're all entangled, they're woven together into a fabric. There's good and there's bad, and when we eat, we disentangle. The waste product is disposed of, is thrown out. The beneficial aspects are raised up and become part of a person's being, and this is an elevation. We take an animal and we elevate. First we separate, and after we separate, we elevate, and so forth. And just as down here, there's a concept of this separation, this elevation, the same is true on high. Angels also eat. In their eating, there is some phenomena of clarity, a clarification, some phenomena of elevation, and so forth. So we eat not only to nourish ourselves, and not only to nourish ourselves physically, but also spiritually, but we nourish ourselves to acknowledge our dependency, and we nourish to create order where disorder exists. Hashem created shviras hakelim, disorder, chaos, and we have to create order. And there's two steps. The first step is creating order. The reality is defined by the phrase "Ein tev b'li ra, ve'ein ra b'li tev." There's no good without evil, no evil without good. In other words, everything has something redeeming, and everything needs redeeming, because by itself it's not redeemed. And when we eat, and when the angels eat, when everybody eats on all levels of creation, on all worlds of creation, there is a process, first of all, of creating clarity, disentangling the entanglement. We have a mixture of good and evil. The good is isolated, the evil is isolated. Then when the evil is isolated, it's disposed of, and the good is consumed, and then it's elevated. There are many more points. And one of them is that what is waste to one is nourishment to another. What is pseiles to one, what is waste for one, is nourishment for another. In the reality of this world, we see this in everything. The nature of biology is interdependence. Not just one species on its own source of food, but all species and all other species, because it's a big, what they call a web of life. It's an ecological circle. And literally, the waste of one animal is the livelihood of another, and the waste of the second animal is the livelihood of the third, and so forth. Which, of course, explains what the Gemara says that Chassidus brings, that the mosquito, or the gnat, the yitush, as it's called, is considered the lowest of all klipas, because it's a machnes ve'ein meitze. It has no waste. There's no pseiles. There's no byproduct. The only way this creature can be part of the web of life is when it's dead, when it dies and it's eaten. But as a living being, it's a machnes ve'ein meitze. It consumes and produces no waste. That's considered a terrible klipa, because the waste product of every being is the nourishment of another being. That being that consumes and does not produce a waste, except in death, is considered so selfish. It's representative of a klipa so low that it's not as a living being contributing to the circle of life, and it therefore represents the deepest and the lowest klipas. So there's a lot of interdependence, and a lot of birur, there's a lot of aliyah, and so forth. There's one exception to this rule that we know of, and that's the bun. Mun was food that came from heaven in a heavenly fashion. And as a result, it was already edible. There was no processing beforehand. And there was also no processing when it was consumed. The Chazal say it was nivla beivorim. It was swallowed up by the person. It went straight into the limbs. It didn't have to go through the digestive tract. It didn't have to be broken down. There was no byproduct. There was no waste. It was like eating pure minerals, pure vitamins, and it with 100% absorption. It wasn't disposed of because it wasn't properly absorbed. The body consumed the man totally. Because that's God food. It's a very, very different concept. And there's a chazal that the Chassidus brings, that la'asad lavei, when Mashiach comes in Elam Atchiyah, there's going to be a phenomenon called lechem panog. Lechem panog is meant to be a similar concept to that of the man, which is eating food that's in effect godliness as it's been made into a physical substance. And there also the ideas of eating are not the same as food that we eat nowadays. Now here's a Maamar. The Maamar is about eating, but specifically it's about the idea of eating and eating again, eating many times. Lahavdil, in the animal kingdom we have what's called ruminants. Maligera. Ruminants are literally animals that eat their food multiple times. There's all kinds of reasons why ruminants are ruminants. The first, of course, is because they're always in a rush, because they're also food for somebody else, so they can eat very, very quickly, and they can regurgitate, they can chew their cud when they're out of danger, and so forth and so on. It also has to do with efficiency. Ruminants can eat poorer quality food in smaller amounts and get as much nourishment as another animal would need much, much more of, because when you digest the same food 4 times, you get every drop of life that's possible to get out of what's called cellulose, which is very difficult to extract nourishment from. And what ruminants do is that they eat and eat it again. They have several stomachs, they put it into one stomach, it's partially digested, it comes up, they chew it, it goes into a second stomach over and over and over again. They get everything you can possibly get out of the food. And of course a ruminant is kosher if it has also Mafres Parsha, split hooves and so forth. This is an example for the mystical idea that you eat and you eat again. Vaachaltem Achol means you eat already been eaten food. But in the idea of Vaachaltem Achol, which means eating, which has already been eaten food, sometimes it doesn't even mean to eat food that's already been eaten, but it means to eat the eater. That so-and-so ate, and he was nourished, and he raised up that food to a higher level. And now the eater becomes the eaten to raise it up to a higher level still. We're not talking here about the jungle and the laws of survival. We're talking about ruchnius, because this is a Maamar Chassidus talking about the spirituality of food. And that's what this Maamar is about. The idea that things that have been eaten need to be eaten again in a term of a process of aliyas and birurim. What's beautiful about this Maamar is that it talks about liyasad lavei. It doesn't only talk about now, it talks about the future. And discusses the idea that now the highest creation is a neshama that eats already been eaten food of the malachim. But as at liyasad lavei, the neshamas of today will become food for what's called the neshamas chadashas of liyasad lavei, because they're going to be so much higher than we are, that by eating our neshamas, they're raising us up, plus the food we ate in El Mazeh, to a higher level still, and then there's even more. This Maamar discusses this several times, the same principle several times, using different models. I mean, you wonder, what does the Pesach in Yoel, Vaachaltem Achol v'Savaya, have to do with Parshas Tzav? And there's a Maamar from the Rebbe from Tafshin Mem Zayin from 1987, which I saw in Rabbi Chittik's footnotes in the back of the Likutei Torah, where he explains that the Sif Bey, is the second Perek of our Maamar, is going to bring a pasuk from Parshas Tzav. This is their carbon Aaron, this is the carbon of Aaron on the day that he was anointed. And the Medrash is going to translate Zeh carbon Aaron. This is the carbon of Aaron himself, how Aaron himself becomes a carbon, which happens when Mashiach comes. And we'll see it when we get to it. I intend on finishing this whole Maamar tonight, notwithstanding its size, because there's literally one point from the beginning to the end. It's one nekuda, the whole Maamar. The Rebbe repeats it several times, but it's one nekuda. And it really would not serve us well to repeat the same thing next week, because at least from my perspective at the moment, I wouldn't have anything to say, just translate more words. So I hope to be able to finish this Maamar in one sitting. There's one thing that you need to know, that if you're following us with the text, it's 146 lines, which is quite a kamus, it's quite a bit. So you have to understand that, number one, there are several quite lengthy notes from the Tzemach Tzedek, which are in parentheses, which we're going to skip, which reduce the Maamar by, let's say, some 20 lines or so. But then additionally, there are many notes of the Tzemach Tzedek that for some reason are not in parentheses. And we're going to skip those as well. In other words, as we go through the text, I'm telling you this up front, so that you should be able to follow me. Whenever we come across chunks of references of Madam Akaimis, those are not the Alter Rebbe's. I don't know this 100% for sure, but I'm almost certain. These are the Tzemach Tzedek's notes. And for some reason, in this particular Maimer, many of the Tzemach Tzedek's notes are not written in parentheses. So if you combine the actual notes plus what L'chaira are notes, the Maimer does shrink to some degree. It's still quite an undertaking to learn a Maimer of this size in one sitting, but with Hashem's help, I hope to be able to do it. And bear in mind that we're going to be skipping over the Tzemach Tzedek's notes. I just want to say one little thing. That, as I told you a minute ago, this Maimer has one point that it repeats, I suppose, twice or more than twice. The idea that something which has already been eaten gets eaten again to be raised to a higher level still. From lower than Atzilas to Atzilas, and from Atzilas to Ein Sof, and so forth and so on. But in the course of it, he explains this pasuk. Look at line 1 inside. Vaachaltem Achol, you will eat already been eaten food. V'savoya, and it's going to give you satisfaction. V'hilaltem Hashem havaya lekechem ashasei mochem. You will praise the name of your God that has done with you, lahafli, to create a wonder. And my nation, my people will never be embarrassed forever. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain all the words in this pasuk. He's going to explain Vaachaltem Achol. He's going to explain Asher Asei Mochem Lahafli, and he's going to explain V'lo Yevoishu. So the Maimer is going to discuss the idea of eating and eating again, but in the course of it, amongst other things, he's also going to explain this pasuk. So to speak, be attentive to the order of the Maimer, as Alter Rebbe first explains the words Vaachaltem Achol, then he explains the words Asher Asei Mochem Lahafli, and then finally explains the words V'lo Yevoishu Amiliyelu. So let's begin. And let's learn this Maimer inside. In other words, I don't think I'm going to be doing a lot of talking. I want to do a lot of reading. And I'm hoping that it'll work for me and it'll work for you. It's a little bit, the style of tonight's Shir L'Ched is a little different than normal because there's so much to read and there's very little to say. The Maimer speaks for itself. So let's begin. Vaachaltem Achol, you will eat ochel, already been eaten food. V'savoya, and it will bring you satisfaction. And you will praise the name of God, your God, that he has done with you. And lahafli, that what he's done with you creates a situation of wonder. And as a result, my nation will never be embarrassed forever. So on this pasuk it says in Medish, that God Almighty blesses the righteous. He blesses them twice. First of all, they're going to eat already been eaten food, and second of all, there should be no shame. And of course, the Rebbe wants to understand what is this meaning and the connection between the idea of Vaachaltem Achol, eating already been eaten food, and yet there's no shame. And the Rebbe answers the question by going into the conversation of eating and eating again. The notion of food is, and the Rebbe immediately starts talking about food. In every world, both in B'riya and in Yetzirah and in Asiyah, you have both souls and angels. And of course, as we've discussed it many times before, just like on earth, you have human beings and animals. In Lamayla, you have human beings and animals of course are the malach, because like animals, they're very, very good at one thing and useless for all other things. They're polar creations. Malachim have one midah, either chesed or gevura, while the definition of being human, and the same is true in Neshamas Lamayla, is balance. So in every world you have Neshamas and Malachim. As the Pasuk says, V'lachvedi, Brasev, Yitzarta, V'gemed, for my glory you have Brasev, and Yitzarta, Bria, and Yetzirah. In other words, V'yesh Malachim the Bria, there are angels in Bria. V'yesh Malachim the Yetzirah, there are angels in Yetzirah. V'yesh Malachim the Asiyah, there are Malachim in Asiyah. And in every one of these worlds, every one of these Malachim eats and feeds. Eats and feeds means it eats and it produces waste, which is eaten by the next world. That's one level. But eats and feeds on a higher level means it eats and then it itself is eaten to make it go to a higher madrega still. Says the Rebbe, what is the concept of nourishment and food by angels on high? And it is, Hashem gives them spiritual power. They're fed godliness. as the Rebbe is going to explain a couple of lines later, that their nourishment is a lakus. And why does God give them this food, this nourishment? That they should be able to have a comprehension of godliness, that with the energy that they get from the godly nourishment that they consume, they should be able to know Him intellectually and serve Him with their whole heart. In other words, whether angels have free will or don't have free will, notwithstanding, angels are servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they need energy. Like it says in Medrash, that when Hashem says about an angel, my name is within him, translates the Medrash, what is the food of the angels? The ray of the Shechina, the godliness which comes from Atzilus into Bria, for example, is the food of the Malachim of Bria. The godliness which comes from Bria into Yetzirah, for example, is the food of the Malachim of Elam Bria, and so forth. Now I'm skipping to the end of line 7. And then there's the chain reaction of worlds, where the Ribe, which means myriads of intermediates. What are these intermediates? The angels in all the various worlds. That the nourishment and the food goes from level to level. And between them. In other words, the Malachim of the higher world produce a food from the Malachim of the next world, who produce a food for the Malachim of the world after that, and so forth and so on. And all of these angels, in as much as from what they consume, they provide nourishment for the next world. They're called v'chol kravai, all of my intestines. This is a pasuk, of course, v'chol kravai Hashem kachay, which means all of my kishkis, all of my intestines. And it says in Zayir, I believe, it's brought in Chassidishe, v'chol kravai goes a malachim that are called kravayim. There are angels that are called bowels, intestines. Shebechinas kravayim. Shederach bam, the angels called kravayim, that through them Eiver hashefa v'hamaychal, the flow and food passes through. In other words, angels in the higher world eat, and from their food something is brought into malachim called kravayim, which deliver it to the creations in the next world. And ultimately, ultimately what it creates is maichal gashmi, physical food. So we're eating what's called the pselas of the malachim. Of course, there's the famous quote of Chassidim, a chassid comes to the big city like Petersburg or New York, and he says the malachim, Ifanim, the angels of the lowest world called Ifanim, produced a lot of excrement, which becomes the basis for the glorious materialism we see all around ourselves. Every world feeds the next world. Every blade of grass down here has a mazel, a spiritual counterpart on high, which beats down upon it and tells him to grow. That the entity called mazel, and mazel means a drip, a spiritual source. Hukeach ruchni is a spiritual possibility. And every spiritual possibility which feeds a lower world itself has a higher source, and higher and higher and higher, and higher still. The original source of the nourishment of all the beings that follow until the nourishing of the physical creations. The highest angels in the world of Bria, they get power, they get strength. From the words of the Eibishter from Atzilus, that they should be able to understand godliness, and they produce a waste product which feeds the next world, which feeds the next world, which feeds the next world. And the Rebbe continues and he says, and ultimately it comes down to physical food. But what is in between what the angel eats and the physical food, the merkava from the face of the ox which is in the divine chariot, which is the angels in the attribute of Gevura. You have down here the souls of animals, domestic animals. From the face of the eagle, you have birds, and so forth. And the spiritual nourishment of the highest angels nourishes the svidus, or the aspects of the Me'elia, which in turn nourish Lamata. When on high there's a spiritual nourishment, which is Vashpa Malachim, which is meant for the angels which exist in Elam HaBriyah, So then, there's a chain reaction of worlds and descent from level to level. It shows itself also on the physical earth, Birchas Hashana, and the blessings for a whole year, like it says in the Siddur, V'chol minute for us, all kinds of tefillah, parnasa, in other words. So food comes from heaven to earth. Hashem feeds the highest angels. They produce a process which nourishes them and produces a ways to feed the next one until it comes to us. Line 17. The point of all these various different descents and declines is a person is going to eat. The physical person is in the lowest world, but he has a higher source even than the highest angels. So when the food reaches the physical person, there's two things taking place. The obvious thing is it's nourishing the physical person. But in addition to the physical food nourishing the physical person, it's elevating the already been eaten food. Misham, neshama is also come from Bria. Shesh, neshama is the Bria, there are souls in Bria. And in every world, the souls are deeper than the angels. So the highest angels that Hashem feeds, and that produces the food to feed the next world and the next world and the next world, neshames in each world are higher than the malachim in that parallel world. I'm skipping to the end of line 18. And therefore when a person eats food, they empower the Jew with keach v'seichel, power and intelligence, to serve Hashem. Now how could the physical food that a person eats provide nourishment for a human being? Is not a human being higher than an animal? The answer is, these are the kings that ruled in Edom before a king ruled in Israel. Which means to say that the reason why the food we eat is able to nourish us because it has a higher source that comes from Elam Ateu, which is before Elam Atikun, Ela Sheyardu, but they fell. So what is the reason when I eat physical food does it nourish me? Because the source of my food is even a higher level. What is the reason I have to eat this food that I should be able to elevate it? When a human being eats this food, so first of all, he's bringing clarity into entanglement. And second of all, he's raising the food up l'shashim to their root. Is in the highest levels. And what is the highest levels? Each one of the four angels has the face of Adam. In other words, you had four faces in the chariot. The face of an ox, the face of an eagle, the face of a lion, the face of a man. Relatively speaking, the face of the man is more pneumistic, is deeper than the other three faces. Before the Jew eats it, it's coming through the angels. And the angels are the animal aspects of the Merkava. When a Yid eats it, he raises them back up, but not that they should go back to their source, but it goes to the other. Therefore, only a human being, Yucha, line 21, is able to elevate them. And the Rebbe adds a few cryptic words. Because Adam comes from Kavem Tzoy, which is Mavrich Manakatzav Achol. Okay, I don't know exactly how Adam comes from Kavem Tzoy. You have Adi, Sheda, Nesher, Lecheda, Nesher is Kavem Tzoy, the way I understand it. This is a deeper idea. And the Chayr of the Vart is, they're animals in the Merkava, and Adam is a person in the Merkava. And remember, there's two Adams in the Merkava. There's the Adam, which is the fourth leg of the Merkava. And then more importantly, there's the Adam Sha'ala Kisi. There's the Gadis, which is on top of the legs of the Merkava, which is sitting there. And the Pashtas, he's talking about the Adam, which is one of the Raglei HaMerkava, V'tzarachi and K'tzas. But in any case, when a human being eats food and he's human, the food is then re-elevated, but it doesn't go back to its source. In the animals of the Merkava, it's elevated in the Adam of the Merkava. So, we're doing Vaachaltem Achol. There was food that was eaten by the Malachim to nourish them, and their waste nourishes us. So the food that they already ate, we're eating again, and elevating the food of the Malachim, and indirectly, the Malachim themselves, in effect, from the Madrega of Behema V'chayet to the Madrega of Adam, to an Aliyah, to a higher Madrega. So the angels eat, and we eat what they ate, and by eating what they ate, we're raising it higher than the level of the Malachim themselves. Line 22. And the Rebbe continues and he says, V'hine, Kimei Sham Malachim da'ata, just like angels nowadays, Angels are angels. They're servants of God. They have great hasaga and eloquence and all the rest. Compared to a neshama of a human being, they're considered an animal. Because the source of animals comes from the angel. which all the spiritual animals receive from Adam Elyon, and the neshama of a yid comes from Adam Elyon directly himself. And therefore, the reason it is that angels need people is because angels are called behemoths and chayes, and human beings are called Adam. Adam is higher than behemoth, and the Adam is able to elevate the behemoth. Says the Rebbe on line 23, Kacha filu neshama is the act of the same Kevisera, the souls of now. That lagabi neshama, she is Galil Yasid, when we compare the souls of today to the souls of when Mashiach comes, Nikraim Gamkin, behemoths are also called animals. Skip 3 lines to line 26. Even the neshamas of today, that now are eaters, will become the eaten. Lis ales, to be elevated. Based on the neshamas and those souls. V'hainu, and how is this? That the souls of today will become material, physical. To become physical foods. But it doesn't mean that the neshamas of the Asad Lavi are going to eat people. It means that the human souls of today are going to be evolving in the forms of animals. For example, of Yossi V'Sheirabar, the food of the Asad Lavi. So the neshamas of today, which eat the already been eaten food of the Malachim, are themselves going to become food for the neshamas chadashas of the Asad Lavi. So you can eat again still. V'atzadichim yeichlu some and the neshamas of Allah are going to eat the neshamas of the day and raise up to their source as hamaychel, the food kedugmas, similar to the idea. Shan neshama is the out of the angels of now. Ma'ilem amacholam agashim elevate physical food. Sheshash malachim that come from the angels. Similarly, asad lave, the person that was the eater and the elevator, nowadays is going to become the eaten and the elevated compared to the neshamas of the Asad Love. Line 34, please. What's the logic? Why does the eater become an eaten? The only level of godliness which we can know intimately is the level of godliness called Mamal, which means revealed, limited, and distinct godliness. It's limited godliness. It comes only from the Kav, which is after Tzavei and from the godliness which is limited and contained. Haim kol neshama is the ata, the souls of nowadays get their existence. Aval Yossi, when Mashiach comes, the godliness which is going to be revealed, and if I understand it correctly, as an oir pnimi, is going to be save of kalam. Shu b'chinas ha'igol shlefnei ha'kav, which goes on godliness which is higher than the kav and higher than the tzimtzum. Those are the kinds of souls that are going to be manifest when Mashiach comes. And of course, they're much higher than the souls of today, and therefore they're going to be able to eat the eaten. They'll be able to eat the already been eaten. The shamas to bring them up to a higher level still. Now, what's the difference between a Malach Kalam and a Seif Kalam? I could say many different things, but I want to suggest this, amongst other things, of course. Maamar Vaachaltem means Eir B'Keli, light that goes into a vessel. Seif Kalam means Eir by itself. Now, what's wrong with light by itself? Light by itself is better than light in a vessel. Because light by a vessel is contained by the vessel, and limited by the vessel, and controlled by the vessel, divided by the vessel. Light by itself is all above all those things. And of course, the answer is, of course, Seif Kalam is higher than Maamar Vaachaltem. But because it's so high, Legabeinu, it's hidden. To us, it's concealed and hidden. And therefore, the idea that La'asad Lave, there are going to be neshamas in a position to eat the neshamas of nowadays, because they're going to be such sensitive neshamas that they can relate to godliness without the godliness needing a vessel. Well, the godliness needing a tzimtzum, not of keser and not of chokhmah, not of bin, as opposed to nowadays. So the bottom line is, the end of the story is, if you will, that neshamas that themselves eat already been eaten food will become food to higher neshamas La'asad Lave. Line 37. And this is the meaning of Vaachaltem Achol, you will eat already been eaten food. Something already eaten. You'll eat it a second time. This means that a neshama is the current souls. We're in the level of Adam, which means that they were already positioned themselves to elevate already been elevated food. And nevertheless, they themselves will become the food of eaten by to raise them to a higher level. And that's the meaning of the first few words in the Pasuk. Vaachaltem Achol, eat already been eaten food. And the Asad Lave, the Neshamas then will be given the same commandment, eat already been eaten food. And specifically it goes on the Neshamas. So we explained the two words Vaachaltem Achol. Now let's explain the words V'ilaltem Hashem Hashem Elokecha Mishasei Macham Lahafle. As I told you in my introduction, that amongst the various things that the Rebbe is going to do here, is going to explain this pasuk. So listen to the pshat. V'ilaltem Hashem Elokecha Asher Asei Macham. Hashem gave you the mile of Asiyah, action, and by giving you the mile of Asiyah, you can have the mile of Lahafle. Listen how he explains it. This also explains the pasuk V'ilaltem, line 38. S. The game you're going to praise the Eibishter and wonders with you. What does this mean? When Mashiach comes, there will be all the birurim, all the clarifications needed will have taken place. And not only will the disentangling and the clarifications having taken place, but the ascending, the raising up to the higher levels will also have taken place. By the souls nowadays clarify, separate good from bad, and raise up everything of today. And the second thing is going to happen is the souls that are now eating will become the eaten when Mashiach comes. But now another thing happens. The first idea is that the world eats, malachim and animals eat. Second idea is that human beings eat what's already been eaten. The third idea is that the neshamas themselves become food for the malachim that are eating them, which are on a higher madregam. But there's another point. And the other point is, when we, the neshamas of nowadays, become food for the neshamas lasad lava, we become their wife, their makabel, and we become their crown even higher than them. In other words, it is a concept of b'chinas er chesed, that although directly we're here and they're here, so they raise us up, but everything works in a circle. In other words, after you raise yourself up, you go down. And in as much as you're going down, you have to go mimata lamala, from the bottom up. That kesem malchus, sheyiyah malchus b'chinas kesem, that from the lowest level, which come to the highest level, not seifan v'chol. In other words, v'yiyu kol ha'ashpois adei b'chinas malchus. The third idea is this. The neshamas today eat animals and plants and raise them up. The neshamas that lost loving and eat neshamas of today. And then the neshamas of today are going to become the mashpia into the neshamas that lost love, even though we're lower than them. But we're going to become a mashpia. The neshamas lost love again, but they're going to save kalama. They're going to be masak without kli. And they're going to eat the neshamas of nowadays. We're going to become their mashpia. Why? Because Hashem asay imahim. Hashem gave us mitzvahs maisias. And because Hashem gave us physical, practical mitzvahs, though we're so much lower than the neshamas of Laslavi, we have the advantage of asiyah liyelaham. Actions bring you to atzmos. And therefore, lahafli, we become the mashpia into the neshamas that have consumed us. As the Pasuk says, when Mashiach comes, line 42, which means to say that when Mashiach comes, in addition to the idea that there is the concept of the higher neshamas eating the lower neshamas, there's also the idea that these lower neshamas become the mashpiyim into the higher neshamas. On line 42, at the end of the line, there's going to be a wonder. What is this wonder? Because Hashem gave us the ma'ila of asiyah, and therefore lahafli. Says the Rabbi in Yiddish. How you know this means? That you save ma'isa. We do actions in this life, and actions are the safe mice. So we're going to be the wonder, the crown of Malchus, which is higher than Zoh. So first of all, there's Vaachaltem Achol, that the neshamas of Mashiach are going to eat the neshamas of nowadays. And second of all, there's V'ilaltem Lahafli, that the neshamas that are going to be eaten are going to become the mashpiyim. But then there's the last three words, and he gives a very, very interesting pshat. Very interessant. Line 44. We can now explain the last words in this pasuk. My people are not going to be embarrassed. Now, why would you think we're going to be embarrassed? And on the opposite end, why would you think that in Lasalov we're not going to be embarrassed? And the Rebbe answers, we all know that And we all expect Mashiach to come, and when Mashiach comes, there's going to be Kel Chassan and Kel Kala, the voice of the Chassan, the voice of the Kala. And the Rebbe argues in this shtickle Maimer that now women are not allowed to speak, not able to speak. Lost Lavi, they will. Avalakal, you have Kale, who am Shachav Ashba. The word voice means what brings down and reveals, gives. In our world, the Torah says, Akil, Kil, Yankiv, Mebechinas Tchar. Who has voice? The masculine aspect has voice. And I believe it has to do with, if you look at the two Hakels, the first one is missing a Vav, and the second one has a Vav. And that's the masculine aspect in which voice comes. Mebechinas Tchar from the masculine aspect, that Nimshach Hashpa, Benukv. The flow reaches the feminine aspect. Is called the Kala herself has no voice because Malchus is only a recipient. So nowadays there is only the voice of the Chassan. The voice of the Kala has been quieted because the Chassan is the Mashpia and the woman is Makabel. The man, the Chassan says, the groom says to the wife at Mukadeshes, and she's quiet, she has no voice. And of course, this is not a lesson in halacha. This is halacha and mysticism. That in Pnimius Ha'anyana, the reason the man is Makadesh his wife and not the other way around is because he has the ke'ech of kinyan and he has the wherewithal for kinyan and she doesn't. But the Pnimius of it says the Rebbe, you know why the Kala is quiet? Because she's strictly a Makabel. Aval Yasid, I skipped half a line 47 when Mashiach comes. Shes Tis'ala HaMalchus, that the Makabel, the Kala is raised up. After all the clarifications, including the clarifying of her herself. So I repeat this a second time. The Malachim eat, we eat their food, that's number 2. Then the Neshamas also eat our Neshamas, that's number 3. After the Neshamas of Liasad Love, we eat our Neshamas. The Malchus aspect, the Asher Asay Maham, the fact that we did mitzvahs Maisias, of nowadays is going to become a mashpia into the higher neshamas of Liasad Lavi that ate her. It's like a higher level still. The feminine aspect becomes the mashpia, and as never kill bakal, the wife is going to have a voice. The kal is going to have a voice. And that's a touch of elevation. You're not going to be embarrassed. What's the most embarrassing thing? To be a one-sided dependent. I take and I don't give. Now we're all one-sided dependence. God gives and we take. That's why we're embarrassed. What's the touch of elevation? The makabel becomes the mashpia. This is the pshat. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Nowadays, there's much custom of the mission. Say, there's Pesachim, as the Gemara says. The Mishnah says in Pesachim, a new kala. When you're sitting together and eating, the kala turns her face when you eat by herself. People shouldn't see her eating because she's uncomfortable. So what's the mysticism of this Gemara, this Mishnah, that a kala turns her face when she's uncomfortable eating? The mysticism is, because it says in the Gemara, Yerushalmi Perakama da Arla Simna da Achol Min Chavre Bihiye Bohis Mistakla Be. That when someone is eating from his friend and he's only a taker and he's not a giver, he's very, very embarrassed. So nowadays, in the world of today, Malchus only takes and doesn't give. She turns her face away. And she's able to eat. But she's ashamed. Because she's only a makabel, she's only a recipient. This is the shame. Which is bohis mistaklabe. And therefore, the halacha is that a man gives a wife a ring and says and she takes and she's silent. Because mystically, the idea of neshamas is that they are elevated into the higher neshamas, that all the hashpah that they get is milmaila, and therefore they're silent. But liyasid lave, in addition to the neshamas being raised up, they're also going to become a mashpia into the one that raised them up. Aval liyasid v'layiveshu ami, when Mashiach comes, there's going to be no shame, because there's 2 steps. Number 1, achar abidir hu'aliyah, how the neshamas are raised up into the higher neshamas. And number 2, tiyehi ateras baila, she becomes the mashpia, the eaten becomes the mashpia of the eater. The makabel becomes the mashpia, and of course, v'mkein male elevation is meant to be ashamed of. To say this in, so to speak, avoided terms, all of us know the notion of Nama de Chisuf, a bread of shame. The Rebbe said it so often. You don't want to have Nama de Chisuf, a bread of shame. And I always wondered why the Rebbe would use the Zoharic expression, the Aramaic expression. Because you have it in the Eishes Chayil. Eishes Chayil goes on the Neshama. And in Eishes Chayil you have what's called Lechem Atzlus. Lechem Atzlus means lazy bread. Lazy bread means bread which is a gift. The reason the Kala is silent, because she's only taking. The Kala goes on all of us. God gives and we take. The reason the Asad Lavid, that Kala is going to have a voice, because Asad Lavid, God is going to raise us up, and then afterwards we're going to start to speak Bi Mashpia, into the one who was Mashpia on us, to have raised us up. Now you understand the Medrash, the Yalkut, of which the Maamar began. The Maamar began by saying you get two brachas if you're a tzaddik. Number one, you eat, and number two, you're not ashamed. What is the second bracha? Of course, if you eat, if you're gan, if you're ashamed, if you eat kosher, you eat legit, why should you be embarrassed? And the Torah says you eat, and then you're eating. And when you're eating, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So the first bracha is the idea of Vaachaltem Achol. Vaachaltem Achol means we elevate what's already been elevated, and then we ourselves become the elevated. Says the Rebbe, there's another concept, that even when we are being elevated by a higher force into a higher level, there's going to be no shame. The makabel becomes the mashpia. So there's the malachim eating, there's us eating from the malachim, and there's the neshamas of the Asad Lavi eating our neshamas, and then there's us being mashpia into the neshamas of the Asad Lavi. So we essentially have two things here. The basic idea that eaten what's already been eaten, to clarify and to raise up what's already been clarified and raised up. And we also explained the pasuk, right? In this Maamar, this Perek Aleph, we explained Vaachaltem Achol. We explained Asher Asay Machem. We have the Maila of Asiyah, which allows us to be higher than our Mashpia, and that's Lahafli the Wounded, and therefore V'Layevish. This is Perek Aleph. Now the line 58 is the Haggadah at Tzemach Tzedek, which goes all the way until line 71. So we're going to skip it. Let's now begin Perek Beis. And I tell you, it's exactly the same idea as Perek Aleph. In other words, the same concepts. No, but then there's two new psukim. One of the psukim is a pasuk in our Parsha, in Parshas Tzav. Look at the first line. I'm reading inside line 72. There's a medrash, and frankly, this is what you would call medrash pliya. I don't know how many of you are familiar with medrash pliya, but medrash pliya, there's no such thing as a medrash pliya. Medrash pliya means a medrash that doesn't make any sense. People have published volumes of medrash pliyas. They've looked all over the medrashim and found these really, really, really strange medrashim, collected them all into one place. So medrash pliya is not a real medrash. It's simply a compilation of all the medrashim that nobody understands. And people have written whole books. I have in my home 2 different medrash pliyas. The medrashim are the same. The interpretations are alternative, are different. This is a real medrash pliya. And Alter Rebbe is going to, but he doesn't quote it from the Medrash Pliya, he quotes it from the original, from the way the Medrash Pliya takes its ploim from the Medrash Rabbah. And it goes on the pasuk Zeh Korban Aaron. This is a Korban of Aaron. I'll tell you the code. The simple translation of the word Zeh Korban Aaron means this is the korban that Aaron brings. The Medrash Pliya is going to completely make this pasuk incomprehensible. The Alter Rebbe is going to tie it. Korban Aaron. This is when Aaron himself becomes the korban. The eater becomes the eaten. And by interpreting it in that way, the Medrash Pliya is resolved. So let's see it inside. The pasuk says, Korban Aaron. This is the korban of Aaron, and they will be anointed. And this goes, of course, on what's called Minchas Chavitin. That a kohen, when he was brought into the Beis HaMikdash, had to bring a Minchas Chinuch. Every kohen, when he came into the avodah the first time, brought a korban, an initiation. But he brought it only once. A kohen gadol had to bring a korban chavitin every single day. It was a regular vava. Every single day, a kohen gadol brought a mincha. And as such, so it says in the Medrash, this is what it says in Shimshon Agibur. We all read Tanakh. and really probably the strangest book is Shoftim. Melachim is plenty strange, but Shoftim is also stranger. The Shoftim were great people, but you don't get the impression from the Nevi'im that they were infallible. They seem very human. Some have very limited strength, only in certain areas, people like Yiftach. And of course, Shimshon HaGibber is a very great enigma. It's a very difficult personality to figure out. But there's a lot of mysticism at Shimshon HaGibber, and I don't know it all, and I'm certainly not going to explore it all tonight. But one of the things that you have in Tanakh is Choyd Chida. Shimshon HaGibber says riddles. Riddles are a part of life. There are other riddles in Tanakh, but when you say Choyd Chida, say a riddle, you remember Shimshon HaGibber. Shimshon HaGibber made a wager with the Plishtim that they couldn't figure out his riddles, and of course we all know the story how they figured the riddles out. But riddles. And in Maamar Chassidus, a very big deal is made out of riddles. If you've ever learned the Maamarim, there are different levels of explaining something. When you want to explain something which is easy to explain, you explain it directly. If it's harder to explain, you give a mashal, an illustration, and an example. And if it's so hard to explain that you can't give a mashal, so you give a riddle or a remez, a hint, and the person has to come to it himself because it's so remote. And there's actually two madreges in Achida itself, an easier riddle and a more complicated riddle. In other words, a riddle is something which is very concealing because it's revealing something very, very deep that can only be communicated in such an indirect fashion. Sometimes you can tell something to somebody, and sometimes you simply can't say it to them, you have to bring him to it. So you speak indirectly. The most indirect method of teaching is when you give a hint or a riddle, and the person has to resolve it all himself. And in Chassidus, there's a lot of discussion about the riddles of Shimshon HaGibber, including this. He told the Philistines that they should resolve for him the riddle, how can the eater become the eaten? The eater become the eaten. Now, of course, in the Tanakh, the story was that Shimshon HaGibber had killed a lion, and the animal had decomposed, and there was only bones left. And bees established a nest inside the skull of the lion, and honey was oozing out. So the lion, who was a consumer, a carnivore, now there was honey coming forward. This was the riddle that he told. And simply speaking, this was something that Shimshon HaGibber actually physically observed. He went by the same place in the desert where the lion had been killed, and he saw that there was honey coming out of it. But Torah says that the fact that the story is told in the Tanakh, I mean, it's a big deal. Everything Shimshon HaGibber did has to be recorded. And specifically, when you're talking about Shimshon HaGibber, he must have had deeper meaning, intent, and therefore there has to be a higher idea. So the Medrash links the pasuk Zeh Karban Aaron to Vayayim Alehem Ha'echel Yatza Meichel and explains Vaya Shimshon Tamiyah Belibe. Shimshon was wondering, Aryeh Echel Kol HaChayis. Lions eat other animals. Now food coming from him. So Shimshon HaGibber couldn't understand it. What's the answer to the riddle? Kach Aaron Echel Kol HaKarbonis. We know that Aaron eats all the carbons. Now Aaron himself, from him comes the carbon. What is the carbon that comes from Aaron? Zeh carbon Aaron. This is the carbon of Aaron V'Geimer. Now again, when you read this Medrash Pliya without the Alter Rebbe, it makes no sense at all. Since when is Aaron becoming a carbon? Zeh carbon Aaron doesn't mean, simply speaking, that Aaron becomes a carbon. This is the carbon of Aaron, like any other carbon. The Alter Rebbe is going to be mechadish that this is a remez, zeh carbon Aaron, that one day Aaron himself will become the carbon, and this resolves the Medrash Pliya's linking the episode and the Choyd Chida, the riddle of Shimshon HaGibber, with the story of Aaron HaKain. Ulefi pshutei, and they move and klal now with me. What's the big deal? Shimshon HaGibber saw honey oozing out of a lion. So what? What's he so surprised? And how does he find resolution to his surprise in the words that carbon? And the Alter Rebbe answers the question, and the answer is, and it says in Chazal b'shtei achilas akosem medab. The pasuk says when they eat the karbanos twice, hey achel, yeh achel, and it's interpreted to mean that every carbon has two eaters, or many karbanos have two eaters. The first is people eat. Not the bailim, not the owners, but the koyanim eat. Shekeyanim meichel bailim miskapim. It says in the Gemara, when the koyanim eat the karbonos, and specifically the chatos, it brings a kapara to the person who brought it. V'yachas achilas mizbeach, and the other one is the feeding of the mizbeach. Now, the Alter Rebbe is especially vague in the next 6 or 7 lines. Very, very, very vague. And I think I know why he's being vague. So I'll be vague also. I'm not going to tell you what the vagary is. On the next page, I'll illustrate to you what the Alter Rebbe is not saying explicitly. He simply says that every carbon is eaten by 2. And he explains, this phenomena of eating. And when he says this, what does he mean? Hard to know. So let's play dumb, okay? Both the Mizbeach eating and the Kohen eating are both Inyan bir the Shema Mavaraban. It's the level of Ma, the masculine aspect of godliness, which is giving clarity to the feminine aspect of godliness. What I just said is not entirely true, but the Alter Rebbe is being vague, so we're going to go along with this vagary. The first kind of eating was the eating of the Mizbeach. So it says in Zeyah, that it says in Chazal that on the Mizbeach there was a fire that had the likeness of a Ravut Zakari, like a light. And the karbonis were consumed on the Mizbeach by a fire, that the countenance of a light. And the idea, of course, is that this is the idea that the carbon is being raised up to the chariot, to the Merkava, and to the animal aspects within the Merkava, the Pnei Yad. The Mizbeach's eating was in the lower worlds, which goes on B'ri and Asiyah. Avol, however, in addition to the birur, and forgive me for being inexact, of Shema HaMavaraban, through the lion which ate the karbonos and raised them up to Bria, there's another idea. That, Bechinas Adam, the level of Adam, the Kolol Kela, that includes all aspects. Eine Echel, Ella, Bachilas Adam Atachta. Adam Ha'elyon himself is not eating. Who is eating? Adam Atachta, in other words, the physical Kohen eats on behalf of Adam Ha'elyon. Atem Kriyam Adam Nasa Adam Etzalmeinu V'Gamer. When the physical Kohen eats, it's like Atzilus is eating. That's the pshat the Kohen eats. And the Balabas has a kapara, because he's raising it up not only into Bria, but also into Atzilus. Nimtza thus, Arein, just like the Mizbeach is Mahamavar Ban, Aaron is also Mahamavar Ban, who Amavarer Vahamayla Netutun the Shem Ban. He brings clarity to and elevates the sparks of the divine name Ban, which is, of course, Begimatre Behemo. And he raises them up. V'chein, and just as the person represents Adam Ha'elyon and is Mavarer, Bechinas Ari, Dachel Korban, and Hu Amavarer V'Gem. That the lion is also Mavarer. So what you're seeing here on this page is that a person brings a carbon, the Mizbeach eats it, elevates it to Bria, this is called Ma Mavarer Ban. The physical Kohen eats on behalf of Atzilus, and is also Ma Mavarer Ban, but we see them as separate parallel acts. The animal soul comes from the waist of the Yefanim of the angels. They're disorderly. They're not yet organized. They're not yet clarified. So the animal on high brings clarity to and elevates into itself the animal below and gives it clarity. Because they are and the Ari is in Bria. Okay, fine. But the idea that we're reading is that there's 2 eaters, the Adam and the Aryeh. We don't see that as one eating being done in 2 stages, but 2 eaters. The Adam eats and elevates to Atzilus, the Aryeh eats and elevates to Bria. They're both parallel eaters. Now we continue on line 85. And we continue. V'hine. There's a policy, there's a klal in Chassidus. This is a very, very deep discussion in Chassidus, which is bariches bemis, I think in Chelek Aleph and Hemshech Ayin Beis, but also in a lot of other places. Shemashu b'chinas mavarer. In order to give clarity to something else, bevade it must be shehuatz mekfanes bara betachlas, that you are in and of yourself completely clear. Any being which has the slightest measure of inexactitude, not only that he can't clarify perfectly, he can't clarify at all. He can't bring a clarity to and an uplifting to something else if he needs to be elevated himself, be clarified and elevated himself. So there's a klal in Bidur that says to clarify something else, it has to be perfectly clear. Now, of course, the obvious, the resonating question is me and you. We are Isaac and Avedis Abidurim, and all of us know that we're not perfect. And the answer basically is that there's a phenomenon called B'chokhmah is Bedidu. B'chokhmah is Bedidu means that the essence of our being, there's a spark of Chokhmah. The Chokhmah spark is Mavurr, clear. And only that koyach allows us to be Mavarid on the lowest level. But anything that's able to give clarity to something else must be clear within itself. Go to 92 now, please. Here comes a question. If this lion, which is Bria, is bringing clarity to the behema and raising it up into Bria, we must therefore say that the lion of Elam Bria is perfectly clarified. Similarly and separately, the human being eating a carbon which is representing Atzilus, he's eating effects and brings down Achilas Adam Elyon Sha'ala Kisei, that Adam Atzilus should also eat Shalamayla Gam Mebechinas Arya Sheba Merkava V'chulu, which is higher even than the Pnei Arya Sheba Merkava. Now go to line 96, which is what I'm going to continue with. So you have to assume that the lion was eating the carbon, and especially Adan Akayin, who was eating the carbon and affecting an even higher aliyah, are doing it perfectly. Now, I want to now say this, that of course, the Alter Rebbe is being vague because he seems to be suggesting that the lion's eating and the Adam's eating are separate. But Klal, we say it's step 1 and step 2. The animal eats and raises up to Bria, and then the Adam eats. It's also Vaachaltem Achol. The Kohen eats what the Mizbeach elevated till Bria and raises it up into Atzilus. In other words, the Mizbeach destroys the carbon because it has to separate the good from the bad, and the good becomes elevated till Bria. And then the Adam takes the good and is Makarev it, brings it close to Atzilus. I believe we've discussed this over the years in these classes. There's 2 translations to the word carbon: sacrifice and bring close. Sacrifice means to destroy the form of something and change its form because the earlier form was negative. And bring close means the earlier form was positive. You're taking the good positive form and bring it into a better station, into a better place. So all over Chassidus, we see them as 2 successive steps. The lion eats, destroys the physical animal, extracts the good and raises it up to Bria. And then the man raises up the good, which is in Bria, into the godliness of Ma'av Atzilus. Here, the Alter Rebbe sees them as parallel. And I think the reason why is because he wants to accentuate his question. The question is, if you can eat, you have to be perfect. If you can elevate, you have to be already been elevated. And therefore the question becomes, how can the eater become the eaten? How could you, who are perfect, and the proof of your perfection is that you're eating and being mavader something else, how can you become an eater? And he therefore speaks of the lion separately and of the Adam separately. The lion is also a mavader, so it must also have some kind of a perfection. And therefore, how could it become the eaten? Let's continue on line 96. We now know the mystical concept of Adan HaKoyin is a very high union. Who merkava lebechinas alyenis meid is a chariot, is a representative of the very highest levels. You know what high means? Shekvar is bararu betachas abidir. The kohenem's eating, the kohen gadol's eating, is an eater that's absolutely godly, like we discussed in our earlier shiurim about tzadikim gemurim, whose food was mames kachim, like the helika aptarov and so forth. The kohenem's eating is the source of the idea of the eating of tzaddikim. A kohen eats food, it's called kachim. It's not called tares. It's not called chulin al tares hakedesh. It's not called chulin. It's called kachim. It's godly food. What makes it godly is that the kohen eats it. Now, if the kohen can make food godliness, what must the kohen himself be? He must be perfect. Regarding Adan HaKoyin, it says he was complete bittul to the Eibishter. Shugam as Moshe Rabbeinu is considered total bittul to the Eibush on the level of Chochmah, so is Adan. Uksiv Adan Mahu. So Aaron HaKohen, and I guess to a lesser degree, the lion, if they are able to elevate, to clarify and elevate, they must be completely clear and totally uplifted, elevated. The question therefore is, how is it going to happen that the eater who is so perfect and so whole and so holy, will now become the korban? The one who brought clarity needs clarification himself. The idea of bringing a korban is an indication. The one bringing the korban needs to be elevated. The korban brings a clarity and an elevating to this person. So the question becomes out in Akei. He is the consumer of karbanis, which means that he's completely mavuded in himself. Raises them all up. How does it suddenly turn? How can you justify he needs to be clarified again. V'ha'lah needs to be eaten again. As it says in the Pasuk, Zek Karban Aaron. This is the carbon of elevating Aaron HaKohen. Says the Rebbe v'zeu kavanas ha'medrash d'lacheilu t'miyah gedela. That's the pellet. The Medrash says, Zek Karban Aaron. And it brings Shimshon's riddle. What was Shimshon's riddle? Since when can the eater become the eaten? What's the big deal? And the answer is, since when is somebody who, since he's able to be mavader somebody else, it must be that he's perfect. How can he then be mavader somebody else? And for the Rebbe, line 102, the same thing we said in Perek Aleph, on the Pasuk Vaachaltem Achol, that something which is elevated can be elevated still. The neshamas of today that are the greatest neshamas of today. Ukvar nitkinu, v'nizbaredu, betachlis, they be made correct and clear, absolutely. They bring clarity and elevation to others. Nevertheless, she has got all Yossi love. Compared to the neshamas of the Messianic era and the Tchias HaMeisim time, which are mebechinas save of kalam. In other words, they're the kinds of neshamas that relate to godliness with no kalim, pure oil. So the neshamas of today, even the greatest ones, nikraim b'shem behemoths, they're like animals. In other words, that shesrichim need to be elevated. V'zehu mamish, and this is exactly what Shimshon HaGibber is saying. The eater becomes the eaten. The one who was eating and clarifying and correcting his other, he becomes the source of food. The neshamas of today will come down into this world in a gilgul of the Lav Yossi and Sheirabar, and the neshamas of then will consume them. We are going to achieve our shleimus when Mashiach comes, take it from Yad Mamish, and then we're going to be elevated to what's called the neshamas chadashos of Yossi Lavi by becoming nitzutzim and their food of the Yossi and Sheirabar, raised to Madrig of Sefer Klom. We can't fathom it. We understand very little Kabbalah. And we can't fathom looking at Elam Atzilus as a little kid, as a Ze'er Ampin. But that's what he's saying, that all of the greatness of today is minuscule compared to the greatness of the Yossi Lavi, and it needs to be elevated again. Line 107. That's exactly what Shimshon HaGibber is saying in his riddle, and that's why the Medrash Pliya correlates them. The Gemara says in Seita, of course, we talked about Shimshon HaGibber. You think Shimshon HaGibber was no good. Guess what? Shimshon HaGibber carries the Eibishter's name. As the Pasuk says, that godliness has two names, Hashem and Elikim. And the two names of godliness, Hashem and Elikim, are like the sun and its shield. So Shimshon HaGibber is compared to godliness. And which madreg of godliness? The higher madreg of godliness. Asher Shem Havaya, Hu Bechinas Shemesh. The divine name Havaya, which goes in itself as the sun, which is of course Shalamaylim Bechinas Shem Elikim. It's higher than the divine name Elikim, which relatively speaking, although it's godly, it's Hu Bechinas Mogen V'Nartik. It's a sheath and a shield. Lahaster Gila Shem Havaya, to limit and to conceal over the godly revelations. So that the Hamalachim, the B'yam, Kablam al Yedei, Hamogiv and Ativ, the lower creations in the lower worlds, like the angels, receive only through the shield. But Shimshon HaGibber is the Havaya. the highest level of godliness. And I want to mention Agad. This is one of those things that I think is so interesting. It says in Sfarim that the sun has three names: Shemesh, Chama, and Cheres. Shemesh means the sun, Chama means the sun, and Cheres means the sun. And I have all kinds of opinions about this. But when it says Shemesh, it's talking about the same sun, the same globe, the same physical presence, the same physical space. It reminds you of the Eibishter. When it says Chama, very, very often, Chama is used in the context of Avodah Zarah. Whenever they speak of idol worship, they say Mishtachavim lachama. They never say Shemesh. Because I believe that in the physical sun represents mystical concepts that are distinct. Physically, Shemesh means the sun, and Chama means the sun, and Cheres means the sun. Spiritually, it means three different things. The physical sun, as it reveals, the Eibishter is called Shemesh, and Shimshon Agibah carried that name. Shimshon Agibah has an incredibly great neshama, and he marveled at the idea of Ha'eichel Yatzal Meichel. Well, as a result, the Achol Korban, in line 110, the lion that's a consumer of Korbanos. He's a consumer and an uplifter. And remember, we are now saying that when the lion is elevating, means the lion is perfect, and therefore he's able to perfect others, and that's the end of it. He becomes the source of food. So the answer is yes. Compared to Havaya, which is Shemesh. In other words, Shimshon Agibah ate that honey. He becomes food. Even those angels in Elam Abriya that are so perfect that they elevate all the sparks that come up to them from the lower worlds, you know what they want? They want Lishtaba, go for the Malka to join Atzilus. And I'm skipping the footnotes. The next line in the middle of the line, this is the idea, from the cadaver, from the remains of the lion, was flowing honey. So although they are the consumers, they would be delighted to become the consumed, which is raising them up even higher. Line 114 says that it's the same is true in the notion of Aaron becoming the carbon as well. And the Rebbe explains. Aaron is a very big tzaddik, and he's Atzilus for sure. In fact, Avraham is Atzilus, Aaron is considered even higher than Atzilus. Shu bechinas ma, level of total bittul to the Eibishter, line 115, he is in such a state of clarity, he can bring clarity to and elevate the remaining karbonos. Nevertheless, from him himself can come a carbon which is an elevation to an even higher level. In other words, the clarifier becomes the clarified, the eater becomes the eaten, the consumer becomes the consumed. It's going to happen when Mashiach comes. And look what the Rebbe does. He translates the words of this pasuk of Pipnimis Sanyan. Zeh carbon out of this, the sacrifice that is not of Aaron HaKohen, but that means from Aaron HaKohen, that he brought the carbon, where he himself is the carbon. B'yayim, on the day of revelation of Himashach Haisei, that has to do with Mashiach, which means anointment. And listen how he explains it. And I want you to know again that in Ayin Beis Chelek Rishon there's quite a shtickle arichas about the inyan of Shemen HaMishcha. And he explains also that it goes on Chochmas Timah higher than Atzilus, which is consistent with this Maamar. The idea is Sham Shachas Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. The oil that was used to anoint the Kohanim and the Malachim of David, as opposed to other kings, was called Shemen HaMishcha as opposed to Shemen HaParsha. Shemen HaMishcha was described in Parshas Kisisa a couple of weeks ago, that there was a special way for it to be prepared, and the Chazal tell us it was made only once, and it will be used till Mashiach comes. And in fact, it also says that when Mashiach comes, we'll measure and we'll see that it'll still be the same Yud Beis Lug. It never gets used up. Miraculously, it's always the same amount. And according to Kabbalah, Shemen Mishchas Kodesh is bringing down godliness from higher than Atzilus. And listen how he explains it. This oil, which is called the oil of anointing, which is holy. It's a very high level. So simply speaking, Shemen Mishchas Kodesh is a noun. The oil of anointing that is holy. But the Alter Rebbe splits it. And he says shemen, oil, mishchas, that's able to anoint, kodesh, holiness. If A is anointing B, A has to be higher than B. Now if B is kodesh, and kodesh goes on chachma, the oil anointing kodesh must be holier than kodesh. So he translates the words. Da'ainu shehu meishech es ha-kodesh. You don't read shemen mishchas kodesh as a noun, but shemen is a noun, kodesh is a noun, and mishchas is a verb. Shemen, the level of shemen, which is able to bring anointing to the level of kodesh. And he says, Asher kodesh hu chachma d'atzilus. I'm in the middle of line 117. Holy is chachma. V'imkein hashemen, the oil which is anointing the chachma, hu lamayla me chachma d'atzilus, is higher than chachma d'atzilus. So you have kodesh, which goes on chachma, and as holy as chachma is, and of course chachma is the atmas of elikus, but chachma is beriru, and chachma you have atik, all the holy stuff. There is an idea of raising chachma up to a higher level skill. Skip one line. V'lachein kedei liyis nimshach, gilu zeh, to bring on such a revelation. Bebechinas shemen, such a high level of shemen, which comes from chachmas dimah, and maybe pnimis chachmas dimah, that as mishchas chedesh, that can anoint even chachma. In other words, bebechinas Aaron, that Aaron, and Aaron is this madrega of kodesh. Aaron is this madrega chachma d'atzilus. He can be elevated even higher. Hutzach lahavi carbon. Aaron brings a carbon. Shenasa bechinas mizbarer, that as a result of this, instead of Aaron elevating other people's karbanos, Aaron brings a carbon which elevates him to a higher level still. There's so many levels of bittul. Bittul is from chachma ki'echma, but it's chachma tatan, chachma ilah, ve'eid madreges and ketz. Ve'Aaron is aleph har v'chulu, which l'cheda means kesed. Nevertheless, legabe shemen mishchas chedesh, as holy as Aaron is, compared to the level of shemen, which is so great that it can be the Mosheach of Kodesh, Shu Chochmei Elah, Ulamayla Me'ach Chochma, Nasa B'chinas Mizbarer. Aaron becomes the affected rather than the effector. That as a result, it comes down to Aaron Akain, B'chinas Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. Aaron by himself is such a great level, and he's so perfect that he's able to elevate Karbonis, and yet B'yoyim himashach, on the day he was anointed, where he is raised up to a higher madrega, there's a concept called Zek Carbon Aaron. Aaron himself brings a carbon to go up to an even higher level. But there's one more klitch, and that is B'yoyim. Zek Carbon Aaron, this is the carbon where Aaron is sacrificing himself, or himself bringing a sacrifice to raise up to a higher level. B'yoyim means on the day of the revelation. When is Aaron, who was always the eater, becoming the eaten? When you have a revelation of higher than Atzilus. B'yem, on the day when there's the revelation of Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. And I'm reading it now inside. Line 124. V'zehu b'yem himashachis. And the question is, L'cheira havale l'meim b'yem himashachis. Aaron HaKohen was not a regular Kohen. He was a Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Gadol doesn't bring a Minchas Chinuch once. He brings one every day. Minchas Chavitin, Machatzisa b'Aboker, Machatzisa b'Erev, like it says in Chumash, in Parshas Tzav, in our Parsh. So it should say, from the day he was anointed, he has to bring that carbon every day. Why did it say, on the day he was anointed? Or me specifically, bid doesn't mean on, it means in the day he was anointed. Vim kein mahu b'yem himashach, I say, in the day he was anointed. It should say, from the day he was anointed. El, the didn't say with the teretz is, Kedei shayadei ze yihiyeh. To be sure, we takem me that the Kohen Gadol is going to affect that b'chol yem v'yem every single day ad elam ever till Mashiach forever. There will be gilui bechinas amadreges yem himashach eisei, the revelation of the level that's called Yom himashach eisei, because Yom himashach eisei does not mean the day he was anointed, but rather the revelation of the madreg of Shem Mishchas Chedesh. Ki Yom, the meaning of the word Yom in Chassidishe and Kabbalah is melashne ha'arav agili, to shine and to reveal. Because as we all know, the pasuk in Chumash v'yikra l'kim le'er yom, God called light day. So if light equals day, then day equals light. So b'yem himashach eisei means on the light that can reveal Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. That it's not just a day, it's a revelation. And I'm skipping the next few lines because this is a footnote from Tzemach Tzedek. Line 129, v'zehu iyin b'yom. When there was the revelation of Himashach Eisei higher than Atzilus, the Echal becomes the Neachal, the eater becomes the eaten, Aaron becomes a carbon, or he brings a carbon. Line 130. Another example. In other words, in addition to the Vaachaltem Achol, which our Maamar started with, in addition to Shimshon Agiba's riddle, in addition to the Pasuk in our Parsha, which is the third model, we have a fourth example for the same idea, that the elevator becomes the elevated. That in Parshas Nossi, which of course we're reading soon, we just read because of the Nesiim Estes. We read about the 12 heads of the tribe, the 12 princes, bringing karbonos on successive days. Bechanukas HaMizbech, it initiated the Mizbeach. The Pasuk says, Zeis Chanukas HaMizbech. This is how the Mizbeach was initiated. B'yem, on the day he mashach that it was anointed. So the question becomes, how many days did the Nesiim bring their karbonos? 12 days. How many days was the Mizbeach anointed? 1. So what do you mean they brought a B'yem Mashach? They brought karbonos over the course of 12 days. Only the first of the Nesiim, which was Yehuda, Nachshon, and Aminadav, was Zaycha, that his carbon was brought on the same day that the anointing took place. The only one of the 12 Nesiim whose carbon was brought on a day that the physical anointing of the Beis HaMikdash and Aaron took place was that carbon Nachshon, the carbon of Nachshon ben Aminadav from Shevet Yehuda. And how can the Torah say in the summary, in the Sachakal, in the total of all 12 Nesiim, al karbonas shall kol Nesiim b'yemi mashach, and they were anointed. The Beis Hamikdash was anointed, and the teretz is because b'yemi mashach means on the revelation of this madrega. El nefish u'bechinas madrega is a carbon JV. We all know the kind of carbon they brought was kaides or mizdik kesev or k'teides v'chulu. They brought very unusual karbonas and very high karbones, higher than the regular karbones. Because their karbonos was such a great thing, they affected, although physically, the anointing of the Kohen Gadol and the Beis Hamikdash was only on that one day, but that from the level of the revelation of Shemen Mishchas Kedesh, Kamei Carbon Nachshen, which happened on the first day of Nisan, when they physically anointed the Kohen Gadol, Shahaya B'Peil Mamish B'Yem Mashach, spiritually speaking, Kachim Shichu Gam, they brought it down that Kol HaNesim, or the remaining princes, Kol Echad Ve'echad B'Yem, each one on his day, that you had Mibechinas Yom, the revelation of Yom means revelation, He Mashach of the Shemen Mishchas Kedesh. Same is true by Aaron HaKohen, that there was a mincha, a carbon mincha, which he brought tamid every day Adel forever. Every single day, the Kohen Gadol brought a carbon minchas chavitin machatzisa b'vega machatzisa b'erev, and nevertheless you say that every day of his life as a Kohen Gadol is the day he was anointed. How many years a Kohen Gadol's is immaterial when he brings the carbon Aaron, it's hu bechinas, it's the mystical level of b'yemi mashach. Every day he brings down that revelation. In other words, he brings down the shemen atev, the good oil which is higher than atzilus. For there is gili v'amshachazu, and by bringing down this revelation, the Kohen Gadol, who's able to elevate everybody else, becomes the elevated. The level of Chochmei and L'chede means higher than Chochmei. But okay, I'm not starting up. Of course, higher than that in Akei. V'zehu, and this is the pshat in the Medrash Pliya. Shemesayim HaMedrash. We don't understand the pasuk. What does it mean that Aaron becomes a carbon? And we answer the question with the question, what does Shimshon Agiba mean in his riddle? And the teretz is, Ve'ez as a carbon Aaron. You want to understand Shimshon Agiba, look at Aaron HaKohen. Explains the Rebbe. Kiba Karbon, and Shalafan of Yachar of all the other karbonas described in our Parsha. Ksiv Zeis Teiras HaElah. It's described as the sacrifice of an animal. Zeis Teiras HaMincha, the sacrifice of flour and oil. Ve'zeis Teiras HaOsham, the sacrifice of an animal. And all of a sudden by Aaron HaKohen it says there's carbon Aaron, which means mystically and spiritually speaking that the carbon is not the animal but Aaron HaKohen himself. Carbon Aaron Ksiv Zeh. And the reason is normally Zeis, the feminine aspect, has to be elevated. And that's how it is by regular karbonos. Zeis Teiras HaElah, Zeis Teiras HaMincha, Zeis Teiras HaOsham. Aval zehu b'chinas char, zeh is the masculine aspect, which is the elevator. V'hu b'chinas arein sheshosh b'chinas makanal, which normally elevates other things. And now we're saying zeh karban arein, and there comes a point where the masculine aspect, which elevates the feminine aspect, becomes itself elevated. V'im calls that still kedei as b'chinas b'yemi mashach, to bring down the madrega of Shem Mishchas Kedush. Shuam Shachal Yedem Madrega made Naila, which is from a very, very high level. That although he's on a level of perfection compared to the Shemen HaMishcha, Shemen HaTev, which is higher than him, Yotzim and a carbon, he has to sacrifice himself as well. And of course, V'hu Bechinas Carbon Gaveya Yeser V'cholu. It's higher than all other karbanos. It's elevating Adam to higher than Adam. And this is how you have the idea of Vaachaltem Achol. Every elevation, every time something is elevated to higher madrega, there's still room for it to be elevated again. Okay, now the question becomes, so what's the lesson? The lesson for me is that when you have a maamar that you can teach in 1 week, you shouldn't teach it in 2 weeks. I'm sorry I'm keeping you here for 90 minutes, but there was no reason for me to give this maamar in 2 classes. But what's the lesson? What's the lesson? What's the lesson? What's the lesson is the sky is the limit. And when we reach the sky, we'll see that there's a sky above it and the sky above that. Nobody should think that they're ever going to run out of aliyahs. It's never going to happen.